which is exciting to see. As always, the video of this meeting is streamed on YouTube and will be also available on Facebook and the village's website. I think we have at least one and maybe more volunteers to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, starting with David. If you could come up to the microphone, that would be great. And if there's any children that want to join in the Pledge of Allegiance, feel free to come up to the microphone and say your name. Oh, we're going to do a roll call first, so take your time. All right, we got a couple volunteers. That's awesome. Before you start, though, we're going to do our roll call to make it official.
Trustee Augustine?
Here.
Trustee Gale? Trustee McGee?
Here.
Trustee O'Brien?
Here.
Trustee Peterson?
Here.
Trustee Thompson?
Here.
President Kukler?
Here. And Trustee Gale will be joining us. His son is being recognized by the LT School Board, and once that's finished, he'll join us. David is a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps. We appreciate your service. And the two ladies, if you could just introduce yourselves.
We're David's daughters.
I ruined that by my phone going off, so you may have to do that again. We gave it? All right. Good enough. If everyone would stand, and will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Under the President's report, we have several oaths of office, and we're excited about each one. We're going to start with the oath of office for Sergeant Rocco Perino. On November 16th, 2025, the Grange Board of Fire and Police Commissioners approved Officer Rocco's promotion to the rank of sergeant to fill an open vacancy. Rocco is an 8-year veteran of the LaGrange Police Department and has served as a patrol officer and squad leader. Rocco is also a member of the Northern Illinois Police Alarm System, where he served on the Mobile Field Force Team. Rocco, I understand that you're joined by your mother, Elizabeth. Thank you. Your dad, Paul, and your brother, Nick. Paul and Nick, if you want, you're welcome to come up. I know that your mom is going to do the pinning, but you're welcome to join. And when we're ready, we'll do the oath. Or Clerk Saladino will do the oath.
Please repeat after me. I, Rocco Perino.
I, Rocco Perino.
Having been appointed to the office of Police Sergeant.
Having been appointed to the office of Police Sergeant.
In the village of LaGrange.
In the village of LaGrange.
In the county of Cook.
In the county of Cook.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of Illinois.
And the Constitution of the State of Illinois.
And that I will faithfully discharge.
And I will faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office of Police Sergeant.
The duties of office of Police Sergeant.
To the best of my ability.
To the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Sergeant.
Thank you.
Congratulations again, Sergeant Perino. Next up is the oath of office for Stephen Schwagerman. On November 16th, 2025, the LaGrange Board of Fire and Police Commissioners approved the appointment of Stephen Schwagerman to the position of probationary police officer to fill an existing vacancy. Stephen holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from Concordia University in Chicago and has over 8 years of law enforcement experience with the Chicago Police Department. Stephen's father is also a retired member of the LaGrange Police Department, and we are happy to assign him badge number 206, which was the same number assigned to his father. Stephen will soon start the first phase of his field training with specially trained LaGrange field training officer. Stephen, I understand that you're joined by your wife, Carla, children, Ella and Sebastian, your father and brother, both Art, sister Heidi, father and mother-in-law, Oscar and Amelia, and whoever wants to come up is more than welcome to come for this exciting event. And I believe Carla's going to do the honors of the penning, but Clerk Saladino will first do the oath of office.
Please repeat after me. I, Stephen Schwagerman,
I, Stephen Schwagerman,
having been appointed to the office of police officer
being appointed to the office of police officer
in the village of LaGrange,
in the village of LaGrange,
in the county of Cook,
in the county of Cook,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of police officer
the duties of the office of police officer
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Look at that.
Sir. Thank you.
Congratulations, Officer Schwagerman. Next up is a familiar face and a welcome back, and that's Officer Jerry Monsivis. On November 17th, 2025, Officer Jerry Monsivis was hired by the LaGrange Police Department as a part-time police officer. Jerry brings a wealth of knowledge back to the LaGrange Police Department, having served a 20-plus year career as a police officer with the Village of LaGrange. Jerry retired in 2022, having served as a patrol officer, squad leader, and field training officer. Jerry has begun a modified field training program with a specially trained LaGrange field training officer. Jerry, I'd like to invite you to join Clerk Saladino. Jerry is in uniform with his star already on, as he previously retired from the LaGrange in 2022 and has returned to serve in this part-time capacity after being on the force for 21 years. Clerk Saladino, if you do the honors.
So Jerry, this is a little bit like Philip Rivers yesterday.
Yeah, kind of like you're saying.
In uniform. Welcome
Yep,
back.
Yep, thank you.
I, Jerry Monsivis,
I, Jerry Monsivis,
having been appointed to the office of part-time police officer
have been appointed to the office of part-time police officer
in the village of LaGrange,
in the village of LaGrange,
in the county of Cook,
in the county of Cook,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of part-time police officer
the duties of the office of part-time police officer
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, sir.
And again, welcome back and congratulations to Officer Monsivas. That's it for the oath of office, but we also have recognition of our fire department and the gentlemen that are sitting in the front row. I'd like to invite Chief Rita and firefighters Crudelli, Bowl, and firefighter Truckee up to the dais to be recognized. If you want to stand or sit, whatever most comfortable for you, it's fine. What's that? Okay, Captain Baum and Chief Rita, I think, are joining. Firefighter Conrad. All right, we got the whole front row standing. We appreciate it. On September 9th, 2025, the Grange Fire Department was dispatched to a structure fire. Upon arrival, engine 1111 which was led by Captain Baum, reported an active fire showing from the first floor of the structure. Fire crews encountered moderate heat and moderate to heavy smoke upon entry attempts. Occupants exiting the building indicated that an elderly disabled occupant was missing. Firefighter Bowl discovered an elderly, blind, bedridden man unconscious in a bedroom, and together with firefighter Crudelli, removed him safely from the structure. The victim was ultimately transferred to Loyola Medical Center, where unfortunately he succumbed to his injuries. In recognition of these efforts, Captain Baum, Engineer Conrad, and firefighters Crudelli, Bowl, and Truckee have received a Unit Citation Award. Firefighters Bowl and Crudelli have been recognized with the Medal of Valor Awards for the actions they took to rescue the disabled male victim. Today, we've invited them to recognize them for their courageous efforts in protecting both life and property. Please join me in applause for their valiant efforts. And thank you to all our first responders. We do appreciate your efforts, your sacrifice for keeping us safe. Thank you. The final item under the President's report tonight is a public hearing on the proposed 2025 village property tax levy, and I would ask Manager Knight to provide an overview of this item.
Sure. Thank you, President Kukler, and good evening, everyone. The subject of today's public hearing is the 2025 public tax levy year. The proposed levy follows the village board direction provided on November 24th, which was to limit the increase to the levy to CPI. The total levy is $12,860,265, which is exclusive of debt service and includes funds levied for Special Service Area 7. The village levy portion is for general and special corporate purposes is for an amount of $9,701,315. The library's portion of the levy is $3,158,950. Despite the proposed levy increase being below the amount requiring a public hearing under the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law, or PTEL, the village has elected to hold a hearing anyway to allow for public comment on the budget. The final levy amount, along with items abating taxes related to bond payments, appear later on tonight's consent agenda. And that concludes the overview of the levy.
Thank you, Village Manager Knight. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing on the proposed 2025 property tax levy and invite all those that wish to provide comment up to the podium. Seeing no comments, at this time, I'd like to close the public hearing and move into the manager's report. Manager Knight, please provide a report.
Happy to. Thank you, President Cooper. I have a presentation related to the village's lead service line replacement plans. I'd like to invite Caitlin Wright from the village's consulting engineering firm, Baxter & Woodman, up to the podium to begin the presentation. Caitlin has been assisting the village with evaluating its water system, which has included inventorying the number of lead services to be replaced and developing a systematic methodology for their replacement. Tonight, she'll provide an overview of the factors to take into account when executing a replacement program and financing available through the IEPA, which is the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, which is related to the Baxter & Woodman task order and financing ordinance to be considered later on tonight's agenda. With that, I'd like to invite Caitlin to begin her presentation.
You mean the button that says push? All right, we're off to a good start. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. As noted, I am here to provide an update to the board in terms of lead regulations and funding opportunities and what we're seeing other communities do. So I am going to make sure I can scroll here. There we go. All right. So before I get started, I would love for this to be a discussion. If there are any questions along the way, please feel free to ask. I would rather not be solely presenting, so if there's something I need to take a deeper dive on, let me know, and we can talk about whatever that particular item is. Now, I do like to give a little bit of an update or background on lead and its history before diving into regulations. First and foremost, lead is naturally occurring, it's not man-made, and it was widely used in our distribution systems throughout the late 19th and early 20th century. This was for pipes, alloy, solder, things of that nature. Now, starting around the 1920s is when the health industry began to associate lead exposure with health risks. Today, we know that there is no safe exposure level to lead, that our children under the age of 6 and pregnant women are most susceptible to the dangers of lead. In 1986, Congress amended the Safe Drinking Water Act, prohibiting the use of lead pipe, flux, or solder, so we are no longer using this throughout distribution systems or any sort of plumbing or things of that nature. Now, in 1991, the Lead and Copper Rule was first published. The reason I bring this up is that a lot of the regulations I'm going to speak on this evening are updates to that rule. This was the first time in our industry where we were being mandated to actively test for lead out in the distribution system and making sure that the water corrosivity was not impacting any of the lead pipes that may exist in a system. Now, I'm assuming most all of you are familiar with the Flint water crisis in 2014 and 2015. I'm not going to say Flint is the sole reason I am up here this evening, but Flint is definitely the first time that the public was actively starting to associate lead with water. And Flint and other crises across the country like Flint are part of the reason we see the changes in the regulations that we have today and some of the conversations we're going to have later this evening. So in terms of those regulations, let me try. There we go. In the state of Illinois, we are governed underneath 3 different regulatory agencies and 4 different regulations. So I'm going to start at the far right. Water service lines in the state are deemed plumbing, and so they fall underneath the jurisdiction of the Illinois Department of Public Health and the Illinois Plumbing Code. We also have our own state law, the Lead Service Line Replacement and Notification Act, We've been governed underneath this since January of 2022. I'm sure some of the updates that you've received in the past from staff are in relation to that regulation. US EPA also has their own regulations now. So we have the lead and copper rule revisions. That's building upon that 1991 rule, the lead and copper rule, that was formally adopted in the state of Illinois. And we also now have the lead and copper rule improvements, once again building upon that lead and copper rule. Illinois is currently in the process of adopting this law. So at any given point in time, staff, communities are having to navigate these different regulations when dealing with lead water service lines. So depending on what piece we're looking at, will dictate which is more strict. So what all do these regulations have in common? We have to develop a water service line material inventory, a lead service line replacement plan. There's a variety of public education and notification requirements. There are new sampling procedures that the village is navigating, and ultimately the goal to replace in their entirety lead service lines. I'm going to talk a little bit further on that here. So when I'm talking about a full water service line replacement, I am talking about the piping that runs from the water main to the meter inside of the property. Anything beyond the meter we would deem as premise plumbing, truly governed underneath the Illinois Plumbing Code and the jurisdiction of that private property owner. But between the water main and the meter, we now have all these other additional regulations that we're navigating. Now, service line ownership in the village, based on village code, the entire service line from main to meter is owned and maintained by the private property owner. But regulations, both state and federal, create this designation of the village side or public side and the private side. We'll speak on that a little bit more here later on. What I do want to note is that historically, when the village is completing a water main replacement project, the village is replacing from the water main to the B-box or the exterior shutoff valve, which in the image or graphic shown is deemed public or village side based off of those regulations. This is standard practice for most all communities. The reason for replacing that portion of the service line at no cost to a property owner is you want to make sure that when you complete that water main replacement and you've now resurfaced a road, either patching or a true resurface, you're not coming back in 6 months or a year because a service line is leaking. You want to put a new service line in and get it out of the roadway. So I mentioned earlier that the regulations require full replacement. Previously, underneath state law, the village was anticipating to replace 6% of their service lines across a 17-year window. These were lead service lines. I'm going to take a step back here. The village right now is assuming that they have 3,440 lead water service lines across the community out of the 5,100 service lines that the village utilizes to provide service to. So that's roughly 67% of the community has a lead service line. Underneath that new federal law that is being adopted, the lead and copper rule improvements, the village is going to be mandated to start replacing at 10% per year, starting in 2027. This is more aggressive than what we are doing underneath the Illinois regulations. And I do want to note, though, that service lines being disturbed underneath Illinois regulations, even to date, lead service lines, those do require replacement underneath that Illinois law. So we've already been doing lead service line replacements in the village. We did this as a part of the Brainerd Avenue Water Main Replacement Project. That project was impacting lead service lines throughout the limits of that program. And so we replaced lead service lines within that project, even though that was before the required rate of replacement starting in November of 2027 underneath that federal law. All right, I'm going to switch gears out of regulations and talk a little bit about funding. So in the state of Illinois, actually all states, they have a state revolving fund. This is ultimately utilized to fund water and wastewater projects. In Illinois, that state revolving fund, the loan program, has a funding cycle of July 1st through June 30th. So each year we are starting July 1st, that's the start of their funding year. It ends June 30th. And what I want to highlight here is the first 6 months of that funding cycle from July 1st through what I'll deem December 31st is funds are reserved within those first 6 months for projects that were already approved by IEPA and were allocated funds. So they went through the IEPA's project plan process. Those projects were given a score. They scored high enough to be allocated funds within those first 6 months. The last 6 months of the funding year, which we deem or call bypass funding, which starts January 1st and would end June 30th. This is where funds that were not utilized in the first 6 months of the funding cycle become freed up and are projects that were approved but maybe not originally allocated funds are now able to potentially receive those funds through that bypass period. The reason I want to bring this up is we are entering into the bypass funding period, and as I'll note here in a few later slides, there is bypass funding becoming available, and the village would be eligible to pursue those funds for the lead service line replacement program. So I noted that the state revolving fund has both a water and a wastewater element to it. Within the public water supply loan program, so that's truly focused on clean water, there's 3 different buckets of funding. Water treatment or system improvements, emerging contaminants, this would be like PFAS, for instance, and then lead service line replacements. The reason I want to bring up that there's 3 different buckets of funding is each of these buckets are scored differently. The scoring that I'm going to discuss here this evening for lead service lines is very different than some of the other funding buckets. So for lead service line replacement projects, those are funded both by state and federal monies. Federal funds are coming from the bipartisan infrastructure law, and those funds, when we receive them, when the state receives them, are split between a 51% loan requirement and a 49% principal forgiveness requirement. Each state ultimately ends up determining how they administer that required split. So what I mean by that is they could choose to look at it as a total amount of money received. 51% becomes a loan, 49% becomes principal forgiveness, or they could drill down project by project or community by community when they're allocating those funds. For lead service line replacement projects specifically, there is a 0% interest loan for 30 years. For communities that would be considered disadvantaged, there is an eligibility for principal forgiveness and up to a 40-year loan term. So this is unusual. Normally, IEPA's funding has a 20-year loan program, and there is a interest associated with those loans. But to incentivize lead service line replacements, they're offering a 0% interest. So as noted earlier, IEPA indicated an act. Yes.
Okay. That 30-year term, is it payable annually, or how's it paid?
That's a great question. It is usually semi-annually, every 6 months. It will depend on the loan agreement, but I'm 90% of the time I see it every 6 months is how they handle that.
And then it's equal payments throughout the term?
Correct. Great question. So IEPA indicated in October that they have over $100 million in bypass funds coming available for what they deem their current fiscal year. So that's starting again in January 1st for those bypass funds. This is incredibly unusual. We were not expecting that amount of money. The reason that we are seeing such a large amount of money becoming available is communities that were allocated both a loan piece as well as a principal forgiveness piece in the first 6 months of their funding cycle the majority of them have opted to only take the principal forgiveness and not take the loan portion that was offered to them, which is where we're seeing that $100 million becoming available for communities that want to go after that funding. So the village requested 3.9 million during this current fiscal year, but was not allocated funds the first 6 months. So the reason behind that, the village scored 150 out of a total of 405 points. Those scores are truly based off of census tract data and your lead service line burden. There's nothing the village could do to alter their score. But ultimately, the highest scored projects would receive the funds first. So when we're talking about the funds becoming available, or I'm going to take a step back, IEPA ended up exhausting those funds prior to getting to the village's score of 150. So I want to take a look at what happened in fiscal year 2025 versus fiscal year 2026, because I think it's important to understand the trend and where we see going into the future funds becoming available. In fiscal year 2025, so that would have ended June 30th of this year for reference. The lowest funded project was a score of 70. So last year, the village would have been allocated funds without having to go through a bypass funding period. This year, the lowest funded score was a score of 240. What that means is we have more communities requesting funding, significantly more. And although IEPA did increase the amount of funds that they provided between the 2 years, originally last year they provided 205 million. This year they provided 262 million. They were not able to fulfill or even come close to fulfilling the amount of requested funds. So this year alone, there was $501 million asked for lead service line replacements. I assume as we approach 2027 and the mandate for lead service line replacement goes into effect, we're going to see even more communities asking for funding to achieve these replacements. So what is that? Actually, before I jump on this slide, I'm going to go back here for a moment because there's one thing I want to note. Previously in conversations, communities that were receiving IEPA loan funding had been told that they needed to pay 100% for lead service line replacements. That is no longer the case. IEPA, in writing this November, basically stated that unless you're receiving principal forgiveness, a community can fund their loan program however they choose. So the reason I want to emphasize this is communities assumed that if they're getting loan funding or planned on getting loan funding, they're going to have to pay from the water main into the home, pay for that entire lead service line replacement, regardless of ownership. With this change in IEPA's perspective, communities can look at doing cost share programs while still receiving those loan funds, which might shift how a community approaches going after a loan program. So with that understanding, I want to talk about what we're seeing communities do here in the Chicagoland area for lead service line replacements. I work with a lot of different communities around the Chicagoland area. These are just a handful at this point. What I want to indicate with this table here is regardless of the size of a community, whether small or large, we are seeing communities approach lead service line replacement differently. Some communities opt to pay 100% from the main to the home. Other communities are looking to do a cost share program. Cost share programs can even change. So some cost share programs are designated by looking at the entire service line and saying, okay, property owner, as a community, we will pay up to 50% of the cost of this service line, maxed out at some nominal amount, $2,500, $5,000, $7,500. It's up to the community's discretion. Other communities are looking at that split. So if I go back to this slide here, they're saying, all right, as a community, we're going to pay for the village side 100%, and now we're also going to do some sort of incentivized program on the private side as well. So we'll pay up to 50% for, say, $5,000. So there's lots of different ways communities are looking at doing this. I do want to highlight here that Grange Park originally was doing a cost share program. They have now switched to doing 100%. Rockford also was doing a cost share program and switched to doing 100%. The reasoning for switching to 100% payment is a little bit different between these two communities. Rockford, it was ultimately because the administrative effort to go back and get payment from private property owners, or, and they implemented a fee on the water billing system. They ran into problems where a resident would maybe pay for the entire water bill, but not pay that additional fee. So then they had some discretionary decisions to make on, did that person pay their water bill in their entirety or did they not? Is there a water shutoff decision needing to be made? Things of that nature ended up directing Rockford to pay 100%. It took a lot of administrative effort and time. Grange Park ultimately was due to how IEPA was handling operating permits, and they ended up back paying residents who had already paid for their private side, and now do 100% repayment.
Do we know how far they went back?
They just did it for the first year, so it was not far. Mount Prospect is looking at doing a 100% payment as well, and they have discussed going back to the 2022 timeframe when Illinois implemented that ruling that lead service lines had to be replaced. So underneath both Illinois and federal regulations, there is no mandate for a community to pay for the entire service line replacement. However, underneath both Illinois and federal regulations, they are going to look at the village for you to facilitate that full replacement. So it is the village's responsibility to have that happen from main to into the home. So incentivizing it in some way or form is why communities are looking at cost share programs or paying 100%.
On the homeowner side, that's to the water meter in the house.
Correct.
So past that point, it's up to them if they want to get their water service lines.
Yes, so when I'm talking the private property side or the homeowner side, I am talking that external B-box shut-off valve to the meter inside of the property. Anything past that, we hopefully will never have to touch or be concerned with. So, great question.
And Caitlin, what are there other advantages, disadvantages to the 100% versus the cost sharing?
There are pros and cons for a lot of different ways of approaching it. So I'll start with the cost share program. In terms of incentivizing, you are creating some sort of incentive for the private property owner and taking a little bit of that financial burden off of them, but also reducing the financial burden on the community, right? So there's a two-way incentive there. The negative to that is you're also not entirely taking that financial piece away from the homeowner. So someone might choose to decline replacement. You have that could be because they truly can't afford to do the replacement, or maybe there's other things that are more important to them at the current time. So where that becomes a hindrance is, as a community, IEPA is going to look at the village and go, did you do everything in your power to incentivize replacement? Yes, no, that is up to the discretion of IEPA. It's also up to the discretion of the village. On the flip side, if you're paying 100%, obviously the village is now taking on that financial burden in its entirety. However, you can truly argue to the state and to the federal government that you have done everything in your power to incentivize someone to participate in the program. You could still have community members choose to decline. It is private property. But at that point in time, you can tell the state and US EPA, look, we've done everything we can to incentivize this program.
Could we pay for the homeowners that don't want to do it and put a lien for the costs on their house?
There are communities that have considered that, yes. So sometimes cost share programs they're not transactional in the immediate moment. Communities have looked at doing special assessments on properties. So looking at levying a tax or a lien on the property. Communities have looked at doing an agreement with those property owners where at time of sale, the village or community would be reimbursed. So there's different ways that communities have approached that. Mount Prospect's cost share program was actually very robust in doing that at time of sale piece. So for anyone that was considered low income, they could opt to have their lead service line replaced, and then once that home was sold, that's when the village was going to get reimbursed. Obviously, that could be 5 years from now, it could be 30 years from now, so the village would be carrying that cost until then.
Is there an estimate of from the B box to the water meter, what that cost is on an average home?
So I'll tell you that from the main to inside of the home, we see 12 to 15,000. On average, I'm seeing anywhere from 7 to 9,000 on the private side. I will say that I anticipate that price to go up. It's also different when you're looking at economies of scale. So one service line of a private property owner went to go get a price. I think we've heard of residents getting as high as 23 or 25,000 for this type of work. When you're lumping it into a village-wide program, that's when you're seeing those lower costs of 12 to 15. Great questions. So with that, I know later on there's going to be information about a borrowing ordinance for the village. This goes along with that IEPA loan program. So if there's questions on that later, I'm more than happy to discuss that. I'll stay for that. But otherwise, I just wanted to provide an update to the board regarding regulations, regarding the IEPA loan program, and what other communities are doing.
If we were awarded the loan, could we invest it, or is there any requirement that we can't invest it until we spend it all?
So it is a payback. It's a reimbursement loan. So as you're not going to get all of that funding right up front, the contractor will do the work, and then either the village will pay the contractor and then submit that invoice to IEPA for reimbursement, or you'll wait for the contractor to provide you an invoice for that invoice to IEPA and then reimburse the contractor. So there's really no way to invest those funds. That's a great question.
Has Chicago started reaching out, and will they have a really high score due to the amount of lead service and then take all the money away from everybody else?
So Chicago is one of the communities that is scoring 405 or near close to that. They are receiving federal funds directly. They do receive some of the state revolving funds as well. That is another shift that we saw with the loan program this year. Historically with the state revolving fund in general, but with lead service lines, IEPA put a cap in terms of what communities could ask for. So that cap was $4 million, which really helped spread that $260 million or $206 million across multiple different communities. This past year, they took that cap away. So some communities were requesting $25 million, and they were receiving $25 million. So that was another reason why we saw those funds exhausted more quickly. So that's also been a shift. I'm hoping IEPA brings that cap back, just so that funds can be dispersed a little bit more across the state, but unfortunately they don't ask for my opinion when making these decisions. So, any other questions? These are great questions.
Just so quickly, make sure I'm doing my math right. If there's 3,341 homes, and let's say we could get it done at the low end on the private side, that's $23,387,000 just for that private side.
You are not inaccurate.
Whew. All right.
And that is current pricing.
which is going to go way up.
I'm concerned when we get to 2027 and the entire country is having to do this. We're going to see just a natural increase in supplies and materials.
Has there been any relief on the restrictions on Build America, Buy America on copper? Because I know we don't make enough copper in America to support this. That's still in place.
So a community could also look at using plastic service line materials. Now there's disadvantages to that because there's a separation variance required between a sewer service and a water service line. If a community is using type K copper and directionally drilling or basically trenchlessly installing the service line, they can, because there's no open connections, you can put that service line back basically exactly where it was. And historically, when we first built homes, the sewer service went in and the water service went in, and they were almost done in the same trench. When we look at using plastic, either A, that service line is going to need to get moved 10 feet away from the sewer service, which could change interior plumbing, so that's an additional cost. Or you'll have to encase that pipe, that service line in a galvanized or cast iron material to protect it from the sewer service. So there's an additional expense to using plastic. That's not to say that you can't use it by any means, but right now my recommendation is to use copper, but I do anticipate the price of copper to increase.
Thank you.
So, not as great of news as earlier with all of the exciting things that were happening in the village.
Is there still discussion, whether it's state or federal, on deadlines for requiring completion of the services change out? You know, we're looking at 2037 now. I think it was 2040.
It was. So underneath Illinois law, the village was looking at 2044, if I'm doing my math accurately. And now with that adoption of the new federal law that has reduced it to 2037, I will say that the American Water Works Association petitioned against the new federal law, the lead and copper rule improvements. So there is some legal kind of going back and forth there, but that law is final. It is in the Federal Register. So my strong recommendation is to plan for the 2037. I will say that underneath that federal law, there is a deferred rate that the village could potentially be eligible for because you have such a high lead service line burden. But I am cautious to plan for that right now until we see how Illinois has adopted the federal law and what pieces they're integrating in. So right now, worst case scenario is 2037.
Are you seeing any efficiencies in how this work is done? It seems like it's, there's not much room for that. I mean, you got to dig the trench, you got to take the old pipes out and put the new ones in, and it's not necessarily incredibly complicated, but there are other pipes and lines that go through properties, and a lot of work needs to be done on each individual house. But are there techniques is there anything in development to help this country move this forward? Is there anyone trying to innovate as this goes? Do you see any silver linings down the road?
So I'll say that there's efficiencies in terms of doing larger scale programs. That's more for like resident participation. So when you know that your neighbor's doing it and your other neighbor's doing it and the neighbor across the street is doing it, you start getting communities to rally around that and participate. But in terms of the construction effort, they're getting really, really good at trenchlessly installing these. So there's two different methods that's being done. There's the drilling method, so that's pushing that new line through the ground. There's another method called pulling, where they'll actually connect the copper to the existing lead and use that lead pipe to pull it through the ground. So they're effectively pulling the lead service line out and installing the new service line. There's times where that can't be used because of just roots and rock and things of that nature. But those two methods are actively being used. I will say that other states are looking at service lining, water service lining, as an alternative. This was approached at the state level for Illinois about 2-3 years ago and was not approved. And I don't see the state at this point in time allowing lining to be an alternative. This would have, the reason behind it being, are you truly reducing or removing the lead service line? Or are you just creating a barrier that may eventually erode away and we have a similar problem 50 or 100 years down the road? So.
And what about kind of a collective bargaining situation with similar, our neighboring towns? Do you see anyone doing?
I have heard of communities doing that, where they'll do like a large scale bid. I am not working with any communities actively doing that right now. I've got 2 neighboring towns where one community went out to bid, got really good pricing, so the neighboring community reached out to that contractor to match that pricing, but they didn't go out to bid at the same time. So, but I have heard of communities looking at doing kind of a joint program. The thing that I would caution you on is making sure that everyone's in alignment in terms of how things are getting paid for. Is everyone paying 100%? Are you doing a cost share program? What does that look like? So that that's very clear with a contractor.
Once 2027 gets here and towns really ramp up on this, because there have been some earlier fears about there will not be enough contractors nationwide. Is that starting to creep up as an issue?
There's concerns that there's not enough contractors to do this work in the state. If you know anyone who's looking to become a plumber, I would encourage them to do so. There's job security. So.
Any other questions? Caitlin, we appreciate you coming out tonight. It was informative, somewhat depressing, but informative.
Yeah, I am sorry. I never am the bearer of good news with this. So, one day I hope to do presentations.
Grant that doesn't have to be paid back, we'd love to have you back and talk about that.
Be wonderful.
We do appreciate it. We appreciate our village staff continuing to look for grant opportunities, loan opportunities, anything else that can soften the burden or even just make it fiscally, financially viable. Because as Trustee Thompson said, some of those numbers are a little overwhelming, to say the least. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd ask Clerk Saladino to read the items on the consent agenda, followed by those items appearing under current business.
Matters on the consent agenda will be considered by a single motion and vote because they already have been considered fully by the board at a previous meeting or been determined to be of a routine nature. Any member of the Board of Trustees may request that an item be moved from the consent agenda to current business for separate consideration. Item A, a resolution approving an agreement with ITSA Solutions, LLC for Barnacle Parking Enforcement Device. Item B, a resolution approving an amendment to extend an employee leasing agreement with MGT Impact Solutions, LLC. Item C, a resolution approving a contract with Municipal GIS Partners, Incorporated for GIS service. Item D, an ordinance providing for the annual tax levy for the Village of Grange, Cook County, Illinois for the fiscal year May 1st, 2025 to April 30th, 2026. Item E, an ordinance abating the 2025 tax levy, general obligation bonds, sewer system, alternative revenue sources, Series 2015. Item F, an ordinance abating the 2025 tax levy, general obligation bonds, waterworks system, alternative revenue source, Series 2012A. Item G, Minutes of the Village of LaGrange Board of Trustees regular meeting, November 24, 2025. Item H, December 15, 2025, consolidated voucher. Current business. This agenda item includes consideration of matters being presented to the Board of Trustees for action. Item A, resolution authorizing a surface transportation program grant for Burlington Avenue between Brainerd Avenue and LaGrange Road. Item B, a resolution authorizing a service transportation program grant for Hillgrove Avenue between Gilbert Avenue and Ogden Avenue. Item C, a resolution authorizing the surface transportation program grant for Brainerd Avenue between 47th Street and 55th Street. Item D, a resolution authorizing a surface transportation program grant for Kensington Avenue and Ashland Avenue. Item E, an ordinance establishing responsible bidder requirements for construction and public works. Item F, an ordinance authorizing and approving a loan agreement by and between the Village of LaGrange and the Illinois Environmental Protections Agency. Item G, a resolution approving task order number 294 with Baxter and Woodman, Inc. for engineering services related to lead service line.
Thank you, Clerk Saladino. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda and a second?
I move for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Gallant, Trustee O'Brien. Any comments on the consent agenda, starting with Trustee Augustine?
Thank you, President Kukler. First, I'd like to say, and as I've previously stated, I recuse myself from voting on any agenda items related to the village prosecutor. And then I do have one comment, two things to say about the consent agenda. One is more of a comment, and the other one is a question.
You can remove something from the consent agenda, or you can comment, either way. We'll allow public comment, but if somebody wants to remove an item from the consent agenda, this would be the time. A trustee would be now.
I don't want to remove anything from the consent agenda.
Okay, but you can comment, correct?
Yeah, thank you.
Now.
Just one thing, just kind of for future reference, as we're noting these things on consent agendas for the public who review these things, a description. So, for example, for our barnacle device, which is agenda item A, and it's possible it was in when we previously discussed it, but just, an image of what that device looks like and a little bit of an explanation about how that works. I think that kind of information is valuable to the public when they're reading these.
Okay.
If they bother, to go that deep. It's a really interesting device. Talking to the chief about it earlier. And then the second thing is regarding agenda item C, with the renewing of the municipal GIS contract. I know a lot of the things we use it for. We use it to track and inventory many things: trees, lead pipes, streets, plots, things like that. We're on this, a member of this group as part of our payment, and it's $50,000 for 3 years, so 18 or so per year. It's not $50,000 each year. It's each year. Okay. What have been the innovations, Charity? I think you sit on the board. Have we found new ways to use this? I mean, I know it's a valuable tool for us and other communities. Are there any new ways we're using this? It's obviously not inexpensive, but it's invaluable.
Sure. So I would say one of the ways that we have recently been using GIS in a different way than we have in the past is as it relates to managing our inventory of address data across the community and making sure that the address data that is in GIS is sort of the master data set that then helps feed all of these other various software programs that we use that rely on that data so that we have consistency across platforms and things aren't siloed and in conflict with one another. So that's one example. As part of the partnership and membership in the consortium, we have access to not only staffing hours for GIS support staff, but then also the licensing and infrastructure of what feeds all of our public-facing maps. There's a lot of back-end side to that, and if we were to finance that on our own, it would be very expensive.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. Anybody else on the consent agenda? Trustee Peterson.
I am not, at this point, asking to remove the abatement of the 2025 tax levy for the general obligation sewer system and also the waterworks, but I am requesting that the village board discuss this as we move forward. Given the funding that we just heard, particularly in the presentation that was made for us, I am requesting that we thoroughly investigate this practice as we move forward.
Thank you.
I'm looking to do this possibly at the budget workshop.
Okay, and that would be 5E and F, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Seeing no other trustee comments, is there any public comments on anything on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, and I think that's the part I skipped and Trustee Thompson was trying to bring to my attention. I appreciate that. I guess I got lucky that there are no comments. With that, I would ask for a roll call vote on the consent agenda.
Trustee Thompson?
Aye.
Trustee Peterson?
Aye.
Trustee McGee? Trustee Augustine?
Aye.
Trustee O'Brien?
Aye.
Trustee Gale?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Next up is current business. Under current business, we have A, B, C, and D that are related. To save Trustee McGee's voice, we're going to ask Trustee Thompson to introduce A, B, C, and D, and I would ask you to do so.
Thank you, President.
And then we'll just vote after A, vote after B, but you'll introduce all four.
Yeah. So just to make this simple and a lot easier, I'm going to cover the details on A, and then because literally they're the exact same details on every other project except for the street name and the total dollar amount, we'll just say project B is this amount. So this is a resolution authorizing a surface transportation program grant for Burlington Avenue, from Brainerd Avenue to LaGrange Avenue. The federal surface transportation funding is governed by multi-year congressional authorizations and administered by the U.S. DOT's Federal Highway Administration. The current authority is under the Fixing America Surface Transportation Act, which provides federal funding and guidelines for transportation projects. In Northern Illinois, funds are allocated by the Illinois Department of Transportation, are distributed among 11 councils of mayors and cities of Chicago. The village of LaGrange is part of the Central Council of Mayors. The Central Council of Mayors is calling for projects for funding in the federal fiscal years 2030 and 2031, based on the recent transportation bill. To apply for grant funding, a roadway must be designated as a federal aid eligible route, FAU route. Resurfacing Burlington Avenue from Brainerd Avenue to LaGrange Road is eligible for funding through the Surface Transportation Program. Staff recommends submitting an STP grant application with potential funding as early as 2030. Public Works staff has worked with Baxter and Woodman in preparing the village's STP grant application, estimating the project cost at $2,475 million, including engineering and construction. The Central Region Council of Mayors requires a resolution confirming the village will pay 30% of the local match, which would be contingent upon receiving a grant award. The village would then have an opportunity to consider funding commitment again prior to entering into the grant. Funds for this project would need to be included in the upcoming capital fund budget, presuming to be in the fiscal year 2028 or the fiscal year 29-30. Staff recommends approval of this proposal, and I recommend for approval as well.
Second.
Thank Thank you, Trustee Thompson. Trustee Gale, any comments by the trustees on A? Seeing none, I'd ask for a roll. Oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Augustine.
Thanks. I had one comment about A, and I may have missed it in the details somewhere. The resolution is to apply for a grant to surface the area on Burlington between Brainerd and LaGrange Road. And I was just wondering why not all the way to Ogden from there? Have we more recently resurfaced that area? Because the Hillgrove one goes all the way to Ogden in that same span on the north side of the tracks.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we currently have a STP grant for the other side of LaGrange Road to Ogden Avenue that's currently under Phase 1 design that I think you guys passed the task order previous this year.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. Seeing no other comments, I would ask for a roll call vote on A.
Trustee Augustine?
Aye.
Trustee McGee? Trustee O'Brien?
Aye.
Trustee Peterson?
Aye.
Trustee Gale?
Aye.
Trustee Thompson?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Next up is B.
Yes, a resolution authorizing a surface transportation program grant for Hillgrove Avenue between Gilbert Avenue and Ogden Avenue. This project, again, the same policies and procedures go into this, the same budget year. This project would be $6,145,000. I move that we pass this and move forward.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Thompson and Trustee O'Brien. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'd ask for a roll call vote.
Trustee McGee? Trustee Gale?
Aye.
Trustee Augustine?
Aye.
Trustee Peterson?
Aye.
Trustee O'Brien?
Aye.
Trustee Thompson?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Next up is C.
A resolution authorizing a surface transportation program grant for Brainerd Avenue between 47th Street and 55th Street. Resurfacing and drainage improvements on Brainerd Avenue between 47th and 55th Street are eligible for funding through the Surface Transportation Program. This project is estimated to cost $4,545,000. I move that we pass this.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Thompson and Trustee O'Brien. Any comments on this? Trustee Augustine.
Yes, I do have a question, and it's kind of applicable to all three of these, but, I'm just talking about it on this third one here. It looks as if, there's varying costs for each of these, and we're applying for grants, and it looks like we might not learn about it for a couple of years, right? Or be able to use it for a while.
So the STP closes, the applications are due later this week.
Mm-hmm.
We should learn later in 2026 whether we're on, similar to the IEPA, whether we're on the active program list or the contingency program list. Mm-hmm. And then to continue being eligible to receive this money, you kind of have to keep working your way to it. So you continue with the design in the out years, there'll be another color for projects in 2028, and that's when you can recommit to these projects.
Okay. What do we think the odds of getting each or one or any of these are?
I would believe some of these are stronger than the others. The Brainerd one is probably the strongest one. I would say that from this tranche of projects, we're likely to get one of them. But if not, we'll definitely be on the contingency list. And being on the contingency list so far been the way to get into the active program because other projects fall behind or can't commit, and they kind of move those projects up into the active projects.
Okay. And is there a way that we prioritize these? This one of these roads may need a little bit more than another. Is there a way we can kind of stack them in an order so that if they're reviewing it, we've tried to get more permeable paver lots, but since we've had some luck getting them, we go down the list. I'm just wondering if there's anything like that, and if so, You know, it would be, if these are all, if it's apples to apples to apples, then fine, but if it's not.
It's a little bit of apples to apples. A lot of it just kind of whatever fits into the central council's budget is a kind of how they best fit the projects. But if sometimes if it's, if they have a project that falls behind and they have $1 million, they'll look for $1 million project. But for as far as these projects concerned, like the Kensington Ashland project, that's just basically resurfacing. That's going to kind of score lower, but it's going to be the cheapest. But this between resurfacing the stairs, the amount of traffic on the road, and the pavement condition on Brainerd, that has a pretty good chance of either being highly ranked on the contingency thing or into the active projects.
Thank you.
Trustee Thompson.
On the Brainerd, because I know I'm going to be asked by several people in the South, would it be possible to re-raise the road between 53rd and 50th to stop the overflow of water off the golf course as it was prior to 1999 when we rebuilt this road?
It's a possibility, yeah. I mean, that reprofiling the road could be looked at during the design.
I think there's raising the road, one option. Raising the curb is another option.
Yep.
A third option would be putting in, and I don't know how feasible it is, but some type of bike path that could be divided and therefore capture some rain or storm water, which I'd like to see between 47th and 55th. So those are all good ideas.
Thank you.
Any other comments on C? Seeing none, I'd ask for a roll call vote.
Trustee Peterson.
Aye.
Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
Trustee Gale.
Aye.
Trustee McGee. Trustee O'Brien.
Aye.
Trustee Thompson.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Moving on to D.
A resolution authorizing a surface transportation program grant for Kensington Avenue and Ashland Avenue. Resurfacing Kensington Avenue and Ashland Avenue from Hillgrove to Ogden Avenue is eligible for funding through the surface transportation program. This project would cost $1,235,000, including engineering and construction. And this would again be funded for the same fiscal years 28, 29, or 29, 30. I move that we pass this amendment.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Thompson. Trustee Gale, any thoughts on this? I would just add that I know it's just a resurfacing, but if possible, it might be the time, if we were to be awarded it, to look at lead service lines for these streets when that's being done. But with that, I would ask for a roll call vote.
Trustee McGee. Trustee O'Brien.
Aye.
Trustee Peterson.
Aye.
Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
Trustee Gale.
Aye.
Trustee Thompson.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you, Trustee Thompson. I appreciate it. Moving on to E, excuse me. It's an ordinance establishing a responsible bidder requirements for construction and public works, and that's referred to Trustee Gale.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Village of LaGrange Code of Ordinances, as amended, requires that all contracts for the performance of any public works or other public improvements must be procured pursuant to and in accordance with the written purchasing policy adopted by the Village Board. Current village purchasing policies require certain construction projects to be competitively bid. Specifically, contracts in excess of $25,000 must be competitively bid. Quality workmanship, efficient operation, safety, and timely completion of projects are not necessarily ensured by awarding a construction contract solely on the basis of a low bid. To ensure that the village is selecting the very best contractors to complete construction projects, additional requirements that allow the village to select the lowest responsible bidder are proposed. These requirements seek to ensure that the village is selecting contractors with adequate skill, training, and resources to complete projects at the high standards of workmanship that the village and its residents expect. Adopting the additional responsible bidder requirements as set forth in this ordinance is intended to serve the best interests of the public by assuring efficient use of taxpayer dollars and the promotion of public safety. So I move for approval of the ordinance establishing responsible bidder requirements for construction and public works projects.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Gale and Trustee O'Brien. Any discussion regarding this? Trustee Thompson.
Yeah, this one kind of shocked me when I saw it on the agenda as far as not knowing anything that this was coming up. I would like to move that we pull this off the docket tonight for a vote. I think this, especially in light of the presentation from Baxter and Woodman, I think this policy needs to be revamped on, first off, the way you handle the qualifications. If you're going to do it on every bid versus doing it, getting the bidder qualified is just a lot of administrative work. I think we're going to leave ourselves short on qualified vendors, especially starting with water line replacement. I just think this process needs to be relooked at to make sure that we're not going to endanger ourselves and be able to get enough contractors to work for the village. So I would like to make a motion that we pull this off the.
Then Caitlin, how does that work if a trustee wants to make a motion as opposed to have a vote on this motion?
There is a motion. Amended to, or if or person. Follow the motion.
So I guess it's up, I'm just trying to figure out what's required, what's suggested. Is it now in trustee Gale's court, so to speak, since he made the motion?
So it could be that if you want to get the discussion full of everyone, to vote something. The favor of the board is, and then, but as there is a if there is not board or trustee. But it certainly can be modified.
Okay, I think I got it. I'm strongly in favor of this ordinance. I think that it's definitely in the village's best interest. I'd like to move it forward today, but if the majority of trustees would like to kick it, then I'd be willing to do that. But again, it would be my suggestion that we vote on it today. If anybody has any questions, hopefully those can be answered. So
I've got pages of questions on this document. So
okay, so Trustee Thompson's going to have pages of questions. Before we go into the pages of questions, well, I guess I'll leave it up to you. Do you want to start with your questions and then see about a straw?
Do we do a straw poll of how many are in favor of pushing this off till we discuss it further? I'm not saying, I think we need the policy. I think we need the procedure. I think this one is very hard administrative on the village, and I think it's too limiting on the amount of contractors we're going to have.
I appreciate your thoughts. It has a model ordinance that has been looked at by our staff, by our village attorney. The one change that our staff really pushed was the dollar amount. A lot of towns are at $25,000. We're at $50,000 to make sure that smaller projects don't have to go through. But this is the model ordinance that has been passed by almost every village that's looked at it.
How many villages have passed it?
I don't know that number, but it's a lot. I could tell you Countryside did. There's several. I know that we looked to see how many went to 50,000, and we were able to find 3 or 4 at that. But it's very passed by a lot of villages.
I would just like to say that I agree with Trustee Thompson on this one. I mean, there was no mention of this even unless I missed it, and I do miss these things sometimes, but I didn't even see mention of something like this in an executive memo. So when I saw this and started reading through it, there's a lot of it I think that's going to make sense for us. But I think it's a pretty big issue, and I do have some concerns about it limiting, the bids that we do get, And I would have liked to have had a little more time to think it over. I did talk with some staff about it, and I said, where else has this been instituted, and are they seeing success with it, or are they seeing that they're getting fewer applicants, or prices are skyrocketing as a result? So I feel like something like this, and the staff, didn't give me any specifics on what other towns had used it. So I'd like to know if they're satisfied and just how it's gone one way or the other. And just make sure that we understand what this potentially means to us coming into a busy construction cycle in the next 10 years.
All right, does anybody else feel strongly on this? Mr. Gale.
Thank you, Mr. President. I simply wanted to chime in and say I'm ready to move forward tonight as well. I think the dollar threshold gives us the flexibility that folks are concerned about. I think that sets a line below which we're not going to be beholden to these requirements. And I think setting clear qualifications and getting good high quality work is good and something we should have. We've always had the ability to retain the responsible bidder, but we didn't have clearer rules. So I'm in favor of it, and I'm ready to move forward tonight.
Trustee O'Brien, are you signaling something? I can't tell.
I'm ready to move forward also.
Okay, anybody else want to comment? What I would say at this point is why don't we spend the next hour addressing Trustee Thompson's questions that he has to see if we can answer those, and if we have three that want to vote on it, or vote, I guess, if we want to vote. Okay, so why don't we see if we can answer our fellow trustee comments and before we move forward with the vote.
Thank you, President Kukler. So when Caitlin gave her presentation, the last thing she said was, if you want to be a plumber, now's the time to get into the business. We can't use a new plumbing company until 2030 or 2031. Any plumbing company that goes out to work on water line replacement programs, we will be 5 or 6 years into this program. We can never use them under the requirements of this project. This program also, when I look at it, it covers maintenance, landscaping, improving, moving, and wrecking, and it puts all the same requirements on the subcontractors as it does the general contractor. This means any construction project we have on a rebuild of a road that has rocks hauled out of the quarry will have to be covered under this same thing. The big general contractors in this area do not use companies to haul gravel that meet these standards because they can't afford it. As the police always say, we have people running up and down Grange road because the gravel haulers get paid by the load, not by the hour. And so there's going to be a problem with that because you're not going to be able to find subs to work for you. And this is from K5, who uses these subs all the time on these projects. So I think we're setting ourselves up by having this go too far into detail. There's also a requirement for an apprentice program and a labor agreement for every contractor. So we've brought in contractors from Indiana. Indiana's a right-to-work state. We're going to now eliminate the use of all those contractors because it's impossible to have one of those programs. I think at a time, and I'm 100% for the unions and pro-union. I'm not trying to do this to say I'm anti-union, but at a time when we're about to face a shortage of contractors, a shortage of people to do work, to limit ourselves to only in-state Illinois union contractors to do this work, I think is short-sighted on our part and could leave us with really expensive programs. Even parking lot paving. A lot of the companies that do parking lot paving are smaller, non-union companies. They don't have apprentice programs. So now we're going to be going to a K5 and asking them to repave the AT&T lot. And that price is going to come in astronomical high because that's not the work they do. Also, while I understand this is a municipal league program, these requirements are not requirements for IDOT, Illinois Tollway, or MWRD. So we're putting in stronger standards than the 3 largest public works programs in the state have. And I am an Illinois contractor who works for IDOT and just completed a project. we did not have to do any of these problems. We qualified for the state to be a vendor for them, but we did not have to have these other programs. And I think it really limits your ability to find contractors. And I do worry about that with the lead line service replacement, having to rebuild the roads and having to go through that process. I think the 5-year limit and these other 2 limits are massively huge to put against us.
Anything else?
Those are the big ones.
Okay. I would just want to make sure you had as much time as you needed.
So those are the big ones.
Trustee Augustine, did you want to add?
Thank you, President Kukler. Just a couple of things similar to what Trustee Thompson has said, but back to the 5-year minimum requirement for a company.
Which paragraph are you reading?
Well, I'm not even looking at it. I'm just going my mental notes. Glenn?
I know there's
there was
different.
A 5-year. There's a stipulation in there that they have to have been in business for 5 years.
I believe there's different 5-year periods depending on which paragraph.
Section M, bidder must provide evidence of relevant experiences on similar scope or projects in the past 5 years and indicate the necessary capacity to perform. There is a next paragraph N is a statements as to past performance which shall give an accurate, complete record of all public works projects completed in the past 3 years by the bidder. So we have 5 years in one paragraph and 3 in the second.
Right. They're different requirements.
But there's a 5-year requirement in here.
Well, it says that they have to have relevant experience. Yes. This cannot be somebody that just started last week in the business. You're right.
Right.
So
they couldn't watch a YouTube video and pave a parking lot for us.
And we're not asking for that.
No, we're saying you need 5 years of relevant experience.
And that, to me, I think that's too much.
I hear you, and I appreciate that.
He needs to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Please, thank you.
Apologies, I didn't realize it wasn't on. I had the same problem with the button as the other Caitlin that was talking tonight. I would read this, and when we're drafting, writing these ordinance, that it's have to provide evidence of relevant experience on similar projects and scopes in the past 5 years. It's asking for descriptions of projects that have been completed in the past 5 years. I wouldn't necessarily say, in my interpreting that requirement, from a legal perspective, but if this isn't the intent, obviously, from the policy that can be spoken to, would not require necessarily 5 years experience, but just relevant experience within the past 5 years, which is more requesting current experience. Give us some projects you've done in the past 5 years that are relevant to this area. How I would interpret that requirement, legally speaking. But again, if the policy of the board said differently, that can be clarified.
So, we review a lot of bid projects from this dais, and many of us have asked questions about the lowest bid, and what we hear from staff is typically, yes, it's the lowest bidder, but we also do review we do review the company, we review their references. Yes, so we're already doing a lot of these things that we're talking about. So I'm just wondering, and I know we can think of at least one contractor, and the last couple of years that we had to follow up with, and I know that's no fun, but that can happen with any contractor, regardless of how strict our process is. I'm wondering where this is coming from, because again, I hadn't heard about it until this last week. It didn't seem like this was a bubbling issue, and it had never been discussed at length, and then it shows up here. We don't seem to have a problem finding people right now and vetting them. It seems like we've hired some pretty good people over the years. And what I would hate to do is miss out on some opportunities with newer companies or companies that possibly don't have as much experience, but they're great.
How do we know they're great?
Prove all of, they can prove their value. I wouldn't want to lose those opportunities. And it just feels like this is, this is also seems like a lot more. It's more intense of an application process for the applicant. Might that turn some people off? I just don't want to cut off opportunity.
Thank you, Trustee Eisen. I'll address a couple of your concerns. This was something that I brought to staff a while ago with the model ordinance and asked if they thought it was appropriate for LaGrange and what tweaks would be necessary to make it appropriate for LaGrange. Again, the major tweak was the $50,000. There were some other things to make sure. We removed the word fabricating to make sure that police and fire vehicles weren't going to be covered by that. Some other changes were made. Then the lawyers were able to draft it and got it to me Wednesday night, I believe. And so on Thursday, I asked staff to put it on tonight's agenda.
I'd still feel more comfortable if we had data that staff could compile from the communities that you say are using it. If they've been using it for 4 or 5 years, let's say 5 years, let's say 3 years. But how is it gone for them? It would be very, I think it would be a wise thing to do to get some of their experience with that. Or ideally someone who's been using it even longer. I don't know how long this has been proposed, but again, it sounds like it was from the IML. This was their suggested language, and then we tweaked it to fit the
I will tell you that I will provide towns that have used it, and I've also never heard of any town that regretted using it. But any other comments with that?
I want to return to, is it Caitlin, what you were reading and how you were interpreting that clause was in the last 5 current years. So if a company came to us with experience in the last 3 years, relevant experience to the type of work we were requesting proposals on, that would fit the description or the criteria of that clause? Is that what you were saying?
If I was asked if that fit the requirement to have complied with Section M for submission, how that experience is weighed and whether or not the years of experience is taken into account other places in determining who's the most responsible bidder. But I would say that in my interpretation of this Section M, that you simply have to provide evidence of relevant experience on projects within the past 5 years, but it doesn't necessarily say 1 5 years ago, 1 4 years ago, one each, not what project each year in the last 5 years. My thought on this is that it's trying to make sure that the bidder has more recent experience on relevant projects and is not someone that hasn't done something in 15, 20 years. And to then Section M is asking for a complete list of everything done in the past 3 years. Again, if they've only done things for the past 2 years, that would be inclusive of 3 years, and then how that would meet the submission requirements, at least. How that is weighed, again, would be a policy determination for staff or who is criteria.
Right, so staff again gets to weigh and say, you gave one example, this other company gave 20 examples. That's why we're going with the other company that may not be the low bidder.
Yeah, so all I was simply pointing out is that I wouldn't read that as a complete prohibition on someone who hasn't been operating for 5 years on this type of project, and I wouldn't want that to be put out and that staff necessarily, if this is to be adopted, be holding that requirement necessarily to mean that, but it certainly is asking for relevant experience within the past 5 years. And again, like I said, if they provided whatever they had for that period, would then be weighed and determined by staff as to who is the most responsible based on that information.
So if a contractor came and had been doing business for 4 years and had completed projects within our neighboring communities, so we can call our neighboring communities, basically checking references, and they've been in business for, say, 3.5, but were successful, that would meet our compliance with that paragraph.
Yes, and this list is just things that they have to provide information on that then is weighed and looked at by staff to determine, to provide these additional requirements beyond low cost of, the best and the most responsible bidder and could provide the best service to the village. So this list is the submission requirements if I was asked if that satisfied that requirement, I would say yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Trustee Augustine?
Sir, thank you, President Kugler. We already do this, don't we? I mean, when we put out an RFP for the bid, we don't just say, give us your lowest price. We ask them about who they are, and we ask them to show us their qualifications. I mean, we do look for that, and we do check references. So everything that we just described, we already do these things. Correct? And then, go ahead. And
I mean, there's some more stuff that I think regards to checking for like the apprenticeship and stuff like that stuff we don't currently do, or it hasn't been part of a bid.
Oh, no, I agree that some of the new stuff we don't already do. Oh, no, I agree with that. But
Right.
we don't just let someone in because they bid the lowest price. We check out, we do our work on the company, and we look at the projects they've done that are similar to what we're asking them to do.
Correct.
Trustee Thompson?
If we adopt the process, and I like a lot of these things, are we going to, instead of asking this for every bid, like if I work for the state of Illinois, the state of Kentucky, I submit all this information and they have a file they keep on me so that when the next bid comes, I think you're a pre-qualified vendor. They don't have to ask for it again. There's a requalification process either biannually or annually, but once you're in, you're in. You don't resubmit this stuff with every bid because if you go to a contractor and say you need all this stuff on every bid, they're just going to go, I don't have time to do it. The estimator's not going to work on it. So are we going to create?
I would ask you, let's read section 4. The validity of pre-qualification. I'm just glancing at this, but I think it may answer your question.
I got to get it up.
I can read it if you want.
You may want to read it.
Yeah, upon designation by the village that a bidder's or subcontractor's submission in anticipation of a bid is complete and timely, and upon any further consideration deemed necessary by the village, the bidder or subcontractor may be pre-qualified for future village public work projects. A bidder's classification as qualified shall exempt the bidder or subcontractor from the comprehensive submission requirements contained herein for a period of 12 months. Thereafter, bidders or subcontractors who are pre-qualified must submit a complete application for continuation of pre-qualified standing on a form provided by the village, also referred to as the short form, by December 31st of the upcoming calendar year. Failure by any pre-qualified bidder or subcontractor to timely submit its complete application for continuation of pre-qualified standing shall result in automatic removal of the designation effective January 1 of the upcoming year. However, the removed bidder or subcontractor shall still be permitted to bid on a public works projects.
So just in clarification, so this covers maintenance and landscaping. So the contractor that does our leaf hauling is going to have to do all this.
I don't know what the bid was on the leaf hauling.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that reached the 50,000. I would have to check the dollar amount on that contract.
But if it, I think we spent 60 grand last year.
Then it would.
Okay.
Any other trustee comments? Trustee Gale, are you still prepared to move forward with your motion?
Yeah, I think it's still the pending motion. So unless,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, I just had one more comment. So in the discussion of how this came to us, and you said you'd heard about it and you'd suggested it to the board, to the staff, but it wasn't the staff saying, hey, board, we're burdened by this process. We think we'll get a better quality. They seemed okay with it? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how we do.
As you said, as I said, it was me going to staff. There were several things, but two that really struck me was the water tower, the painting that occurred there. And then secondly, you'll probably recall when we went out to bid for the sidewalk squares, and there was a very low bid on the sidewalk square. And Trustee Gale, and that's actually why I asked him to introduce this, pointed out, wait, there seems to be something off here. And then investigation had found out that that contractor had never done any public sidewalks. And that alerted me to that we need changes in our process. So that's why I looked for this model.
Yeah, I get that. And I know the water tower had an issue, but that company resolved it very quickly, and they were a significantly lower bid, significantly.
They were the lowest bid. I'll definitely agree with that. And they did, under the warranty, resolve the paint issue. I was thrilled by that. With that, I would ask for a roll call vote.
Trustee Thompson?
No.
Trustee O'Brien?
Aye.
Trustee McGee? Trustee Augustine?
No.
Trustee Peterson?
Aye.
Trustee Gale?
Aye.
And that passes 4-2. Thank you, everybody. I thought it was a good discussion. I believe I have G also, which is a resolution approving the task order 290. Well, sorry, I'm on F. An ordinance authorizing and approving a loan agreement by and between the Village of Grange and the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. The fiscal year 25-26 budget included projected revenues of $4 million in IPA loans to fund the replacement of lead service lines, which was discussed earlier today. With the proposed ordinance, the village will seek to apply to the EPA Public Water Supply Loan Program for Phase 1 of the lead service line replacement program. The $4 million is payable over 30 years at 0% interest and will provide funding for the associated engineering and construction costs. If awarded, the loan will be enable the village to carry out its plans to perform Phase 1 of the lead service line replacement program next year. And I would ask, and again, this was what was discussed at length, I would ask for a motion and a second on this item.
I move for approval as presented.
Thank you, Trustee Gale. Trustee McGee, any questions, comments on this matter? Seeing none, I'd ask for a roll call vote.
Trustee O'Brien?
Aye.
Trustee Peterson?
Aye.
Trustee Thompson?
Aye.
Trustee Augustine?
Aye.
Trustee McGee? Trustee Gale?
Aye.
And this matter passes unanimously. Next up, related, is a resolution approving task order 294 with Baxter and Woodman for engineering services related to the lead service line. This includes preparing notices and preparation of the application documents for the IEPA. If the funds are awarded to the village, Phase 1 will be scheduled to begin in spring of 2026 and will include replacement of approximately 256 lead service lines. The proposed task order provides for the preparation of finalizing plans and preparing bid documents. Of note, engineering costs are eligible to be paid for through the loan program. May I have a motion and second on this matter?
I move for approval as presented.
No, second.
Thank you, Trustee Gale and Trustee Augustine. Any comments on G? Seeing none, I would ask for a roll call vote.
Trustee McGee? Trustee O'Brien?
Aye.
Trustee Peterson?
Aye.
Trustee Thompson?
Aye.
Trustee Augustine?
Aye.
Trustee Gale?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. We are now in time for public comments regarding matters not on tonight's agenda. I'm not sure if most of the people that are here are going to have comments. What I would ask is if we have multiple people commenting, if we can kind of have one person always being standing ready to go, just so we don't have a delay. We'll always know that there's somebody behind, and just try to give you time. Again, the rule says 3 minutes, but try to give you time, but in the same time, move this along as efficiently as possible. So don't sit in your seats. At least two people stand up, and we'll start. And we do appreciate you coming out tonight.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lauren Swindle, Lauren Whitney Swindle, and I'm a...
I'm sorry, I don't know if the microphone's on or not. It's hard to hear if it
Could
is.
be me.
It might be.
I miss dinner. I don't know how you guys do it, staying these late. And with that, thank you so much for all of your hard work. Should I smile at the camera? Okay. I'm talking about the Jackson building tonight.
Did you say your name? I didn't catch it if you did.
Oh, my name is Lauren Whitney Swindle, and I am a resident. I'm also an architectural photographer, and I've worked with preservation groups, historians. I started my career in commercial, and then I learned about Richard Nickel, and I shifted gears a little bit. I'm talking about the Jackson Storage and Van Company building. It is a landmark eligible, oh, thank you for sending that over, Charity, the new SHPO report. That was wonderful, thank you. It is a landmark eligible building, and the newest SHPO report supports this. Built in 1903 and expanded in 1923, it is an Art Deco Egyptian Revival design by George Kingsley, making it the 7th Art Deco Egyptian Revival building in the state of Illinois, and the 13th documented in the United States. Conversations with preservation offices support this. I'm waiting to hear back from emails from those offices, too. They've been wonderful to work with, from the National Registry to the state Illinois office and even the Landmarks Illinois. They have all been wonderful to speak to. If the historic district is the village's claim to architectural significance, Jackson is a part of the proof. Demolishing it does not simply remove one building, it diminishes the integrity of the designation itself. It means if you live in the historic registry district, the historic district, and that goes, your house loses that integrity as well. Also, tax incentives. Now, there's some things you can do to receive those incentives, but if that goes, and if that does show, think of a diamond. I'm getting off track here, but I want you to think of a diamond. This analogy has helped a lot of people. We have this beautiful gem, and it's perfect. It's rare, very rare. You can't really find a lot of it. It doesn't exist anymore. And those that did exist are gone. We have this wonderful gem, and you get a scratch on that gem, it loses its value. I want you to really think about that, because that is what will happen if that goes. The integrity of Grange will also diminish. You can build new housing in many places, but you cannot rebuild authenticity, craftsmanship, and history after it's gone, demolition. So please think about what I've said.
Thank you. I know the board well.
Thank you. And also, I've talked to some of these offices, and it would be great to have a tour in the building. I will meet you. I will show you the shop number Otis elevator in the building that Jackson built and worked with Otis Elevator Company, and it still works. It's great. So my name is Lauren Whitney Swindle, and if you ever want to meet me there one day, it would be great to take a tour because it's safe. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do. All right. Good night.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Al Foreman, Historic District resident. I, too, am going to speak about 112 East Burlington. My objective is twofold. First is to lobby the board members, and the second is to amplify the concerns of residents and the general public. The developers had more than a one-year head start on the residents, and regardless of any pending revisions, I feel the residents need to speak up now. Public response thus far has been overwhelmingly opposed to this project. By my count, 82 of 94 individual submissions were opposed. That's 87%. Other than tossing out the pickleball courts It appears that public feedback has not influenced the decision makers. I believe no decision makers live anywhere near this site, and I urge you to strongly consider resident feedback you're receiving, especially from the neighbors closest proximity to the site. We intend to address specific points in a concise manner. You've all received a handout which will reference as needed. We feel the charts are easy to read, and they're intended to be a takeaway for you to keep these issues top of mind. Now, page 2 is a word cloud. It summarizes numerous concerns of residents. Any subject on that page would spark a conversation longer than the time that we're allotted. I'll point out that this is not an exhaustive list. Additional charts address specific matters. They'll highlight issues, and they'll contain an ask or a request of the board. We hope this format is an effective way for the board to appreciate our perspective. An example on page 3 raises significant questions on setbacks and balconies. Page 4 considers the site location within the historic district. Page 5 offers observations on parking, loading, and pedestrian safety. And page 6 addresses historical significance concerns, some of which you've heard already. Now, if you haven't already done so, I highly recommend that you walk the blocks around 112 East Burlington. Appreciate the existing residential properties in an already densely populated area. Note the significant elevation change between 6th and 7th Avenues. Stand on the 7th Avenue sidewalk and imagine the proposed building, the immense size, the contrast with the historic surroundings, and its incredibly close proximity to neighbors. And then simply ask yourself, why? So with that, I'd say thank you for your attention and wish you good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman.
Hi, my name is Kirsten Robinson. I am also going to speak about the Jackson Building. I am one of those incredibly close neighbors, so I am a resident. One thing that we noticed was that the Plan Commission kept saying this development is better than the plan in 2019. In 2019, our property was a rental property, and no one showed up to defend it at any meeting. It was on and off the market for 10 years before we even bought it, and it was listed as value in the land. We loved the age of the house, the property size, and the location. So the date the situation dramatically changed was April 16th, 2021, when the village approved our permit for an interior gut rehab of our residence, and we reclaimed this property as a single-family home. A property for sale near land value and a completely rehabbed single-family home are two completely different situations. The village and developers should have been taking this into consideration when this project came back in 2024. While researching the previous plan developments and how badly they affected the neighboring residential properties, we discovered one major difference. It appears that no previous planned development building with 4 or more stories in this village has ever proposed to the Plan Commission to modify the setback in the direction of any adjoining residential property, single family, or large apartment condo. Most of these developments had additional distance to the minimum code requirements for setbacks in those directions, which is what is desired by both the zoning code and the comprehensive plan. In the past, the residential neighbor had significantly less of a case because the development was meeting the code requirements. The developer had given those properties reasonable respect as defined and required by the code. The difference in our case is that the developer has not given us the respect of providing what the code requires. And on top of that, provided little to no effort to create an equivalent condition. The setback from the property line to the residential properties to the south is supposed to be 29 feet 7 inches by code. They are currently proposing 11 feet to a balcony on our property and 6 feet to a balcony to our neighbors at 11 6th Avenue. A 29-foot 7-inch buffer is not equivalent to a 6-foot wood fence and 6 or 11 feet buffer to the property line. They are also placing a loading space for trash removal, deliveries, work vehicles, and construction dumpsters just 3 feet from our property, when the code requires a 29-foot, 7-inch buffer. The code restricts the projection of balconies to 3 feet, but the proposal is allowing them to project 7 feet from the building into the setback they are already severely invading. The developer is nowhere close to meeting the original code requirements and has made little to no attempt to provide an equivalent. We actually have solid ground to stand on. We are being significantly adversely affected by the actions of the developer, and I just wanted to make sure you were all aware of that prior to your approval. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming out tonight.
I'm Jonathan Robinson from 16 7th Avenue, and I'll be talking on the 112 Burlington building. Basically, it's an interesting time in this village. It appears that this village has either run out of adequate places to respectfully place these 5-story buildings, or we have come to a time when developers are insisting on adversely affecting the neighboring residential properties to create the economics in a building that they want. As my wife pointed out, there appears to be no precedent in this village to request to modify a setback in the direction of a neighboring residential property and/or otherwise adversely affect a residential neighbor. Based on my research for my Plan Commission case number 286, which you'll see in the near future, it is possible that there may not be a precedent anywhere in the Chicago suburbs for a single-family residence to be adversely affected either. This village actually sits on a very important, pivotal point in its history. The village staff did not identify this dramatic difference from previous plan developments, so it was not handled well at all. And that makes it so it did not become apparent to the Plan Commission, so they were not able to stop it. So you are the last line of defense and the only ones left to stop and not set a new standard that it's okay for these 5-story buildings to adversely affect a residential neighboring property. Adversely affecting a neighbor when building anything next door is completely against common decency. But more importantly to you, significantly adversely affecting a neighboring property is against the current village zoning code and something that you are not allowed to approve. It may not be today, but sometime in the future, developers will be buying 4 properties on any residential block and proposing to put up these 5-story buildings next to any single-family home. And with this approval, the village will have the standard to not care at all about how they affect the neighbors. This could be any residents in this village next, including you. And this situation should put everyone on alert that a developer in the village could be coming to possibly adversely affect your residents next. As trustees, you are here because you're residents. Put yourself in my shoes. Would this be right at your house? Then why should it be right at my house? Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for coming out tonight.
Hello, good evening. I'm Mandy Levy, proud resident of the Grange Historic District and proud vendor at Jackson Square Antique Mall. Also speaking about 112 East Burlington. I've been spending a lot of time with LaGrange Forward, the comprehensive plan, and I do have concerns about what's been proposed and how it's in direct conflict, I think, to a lot of the initiatives that have been put forward in LaGrange Forward, no pun intended, and specifically about historic preservation and community character. These are initiatives that have been called out explicitly, identified as key initiatives in LaGrange Forward, the village's official 10 to 15-year comprehensive plan. And then LaGrange Storage is cited on page 42, recorded as listed in the Illinois Inventory of Historic Landmarks or Structures within the LaGrange Historic District. And so I'm concerned as we continue this conversation and evaluate this plan and this proposal. Obviously, I am somebody who is maybe not as educated as some of the other residents who know everything about landmarks Illinois and what it means for our integrity with Egyptian Art Deco buildings and this and that. And I'm really somebody that just moved my family to LaGrange for its community and culture and history and vibrance. and uniqueness. But I am somebody who is concerned about the integrity of having a stamp of a historic district. And I am wondering very genuinely if we tear down this building, this very special building that is the gateway to our town from commuters coming in, that is for so many years been a destination for commercially representing our town, what other historic landmarks are we fighting for in this proposed Historic Preservation Committee or Community Character Initiative? And what else are we working to preserve, and what other character, what additional character are we working to maintain in this vision? I don't know what other buildings exist that we need to make sure we are working to preserve, or what other character we are needing to make sure we are preserving or maintaining or fighting for. It represents us, it's our identity, and I worry if this is something that has been cited in our plan, in our 10 to 15 year plan, that it's missing the point. We need to save it. Thank you.
Thank you, and very well said. You hit a lot of our talking points, so thank you. Seeing no other comments, I would move to trustee comments. Trustee Augustine?
I just wanted to say thanks to Director O'Brien for the hard work on the surprising early snowfall. That was a big one. 50 years, I think, since we had the last big snowfall. You guys did a great job. You obviously had to battle some leaves, which is a first probably for anyone alive in this room. We'll want to maybe address that maybe someday down the road, how we maybe adjust the leaf program so that this wouldn't happen again, because I know it was really difficult, for both the plows and the residents to have all that out there. But I think you all did a very good job in spite of that, and thanks for all that hard work.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. Trustee Thompson.
But I guess I do have one question on that. If I know we're supposed to get warm weather at the end of this week that will hopefully melt more of the snow left, but I noticed Western Springs put out a note today that leaf collection is suspended and they're plowing everything up into the parkways, and they'll figure out how to move it later. We have certain streets, especially south of 47th Street, that in the middle of the daytime when there's contractors and people parked, they are almost impassable at this point. Are we going to, if we don't get full melt and we get another stone, are we going to plow to the curves and just push it all up? Because I think we have some dangerous situations with our streets in the village right now because of the amount of ice that's left outside.
Yeah, we kind of reevaluate it every day. We do have what looks like favorable weather for the next couple of days, stretching and maybe into next week. We are working. We work today in the south area, south of 47th, closer to 11th and 10th and 9th Avenue. The plan right now is to get as much leaves as we can picked up. There may be a point where we'll just have to keep the plows on the trucks. We do take a lot of time to switch between leaves and to prep the trucks between leaves and plowing. So there's a lot of time lost, moving the trucks back and forth. So there might be at one point where we will have to suspend it for this season. But we're trying to push as hard as we can for the next several days at least with this favorable weather that's in the forecast.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Thompson. Any trustee comments? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Trustee Gale and Trustee Peterson. All in favor of adjourning at 9:37, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And we are adjourned. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. We'll be back the second Monday in January. Thank you.